Day 121 of the war in Gaza, and after weeks of intense clashes, the IDF is now largely in control above ground in Khan Yunis. Fighting continues in tunnels under the city as Hamas has re-emerged and is being confronted in northern Gaza. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
In southern Gaza, after long weeks of maneuvers, the IDF is now largely in control of Khan Yunis above ground and is fighting gunmen in and around terror tunnels under the city where terrorist leadership is hiding and Israeli hostages are believed held. Over the weekend, the IDF killed dozens of Hamas gunmen in the Khan Yunis area, raiding several Hamas sites, seizing weapons, and carrying out strikes on Hamas cells and buildings used by terror operatives. Defense Minister Gallant said the push toward Rafah and the Egyptian border could be next.
אנחנו משלימים את המשימה בח'אן יונס, ואנחנו נגיע גם לרפיח, ונחסל את כל מי שיש שם, שהוא מחבל שמנסה לפגוע בנו.
In northern Gaza's Shati camp, the IDF 401st Armored Brigade killed more than 10 gunmen over the past day. They've been fighting in areas where Hamas forces have returned in small numbers after the IDF completed ground maneuvers in the area. The army plans to return quickly to areas where terrorist forces attempt to regain a presence and resist with small cells in areas where its organized forces were defeated in earlier fighting.
לא לעצור, זה קרב של נחישות לאומית. אנחנו צריכים להתמיד עד שאנחנו משלימים את המשימות שלנו. ולחמאס הרבה יותר קשה, תאמינו לי. אין להם נשק, אין להם תחמושת, אין להם יכולת לטפל בפצועים. יש להם 10,000 הרוגים, מחבלים, ועוד כ10,000 פצועים שלא מתפקדים. זה מהלומה שהולכת ומכרסמת ביכולת.
Meanwhile, 121 days into the war, the U.S. is still not calling for a ceasefire. President Biden reiterated U.S. commitment to Israel's right to self-defense. At the same time, the U.S. is pushing for an end to the war with a vision of positive change in the region.
Not only do we pray for peace, we are actively working for peace, security, dignity for the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. I'm engaged in this day and night and working, as many of you in this room are, to find the means to bring our hostages home, to ease the humanitarian crisis, and to bring peace to Gaza and Israel, and enduring peace with two states for two peoples.
The Israel-Hamas war has now set a milestone, becoming Israel's second longest war. The war is now longer than the first Lebanon war in 1982. The War of Independence in 1948 and 49 lasted for 10 months.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
And joining us now with more on the war in Gaza and the rising tensions in the region is expert in the Middle East, Dr. Mordechai Kadal. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lida.
So let's first start off in Gaza. The IDF has made significant strides, has taken control of northern Gaza, but has withdrawn its troops to focus on other areas. And now Hamas is making use of this absence, trying to take back control. What can you tell us? And does this mean that Hamas still has the capabilities to return to power? And, moreover, Hamas is an ideology. So can it even be defeated?
It's very hard to defeat an ideology, especially when people who will be in 20 years will be 25. Today they are 5 years old. It's very hard to extract this ideology from their hearts. Yet it depends to an extent on media, on education, which Israel will try or should try to rebuild in Gaza, unlike as it was under Hamas. The only question is if Israel will be able, first of all, to get rid of the military power of Hamas. So far, Israel succeeded to get rid of like half of the military capabilities of Hamas, especially the people, the fighters. because they remained in the tunnels, they remained in parts of Khan Yunis, they remained in Deir el-Balah, they remained in Rafah. Of course, the city of Gaza also has some presence of Hamas people, the remnants of the fighters of Hamas. So there is a lot of work to do, especially in the southern part of Gaza Strip.
And so you mentioned the south. The IDF has said that it needs to move its operations south to control the Philadelphia corridor on Egypt's border. This has caused major backlash from the Egyptians. They're threatening to withdraw their ambassador and even more. But the Egyptians are just as keen to eradicate Hamas. So why all these threats to Israel?
They are afraid that if Israel reaches all the way down to the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, Israel might mistakenly damage the border and the fence which the Egyptians erected there, and thousands of people from Gaza Strip will stream into Egypt. The Egyptians will have to shoot them, and this actually will put Egypt in a very delicate situation, very sensitive situation, when they have to kill so many people because they do not want Hamas on their soil at all, because Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood is actually outlawed in Egypt. And the last thing on earth which they need is another group of terrorists coming to Egypt in order to agitate the situation inside Egypt, which they succeeded more or less to control. So they are afraid, actually, that Israel will force, in a way or another, the Palestinians or the people from Gaza to run to Egypt, that this is something which Egypt cannot tolerate.
And I want to zoom out for a minute, sort of looking at the bigger picture. We have Iran essentially backing every terror group on Israel's borders at the moment, even attacking U.S. and global interests. Israel is, of course, on the front lines in the north. Do you believe that Iran, Hezbollah, will be deterred, or are we heading for a confrontation in the north as well?
First of all, it depends on the results of the fight in Gaza. If Israel succeeds to eradicate all the remnants of Hamas, this might send a very clear message to Hezbollah and to their friends in Iran. If Israel is forced, mainly by the Americans, to stop the war or to reduce the intensity of the war, and Hamas, as a result, will remain as a force in Gaza, this will send a very clear message to Hezbollah and to Iran and to their friends in Iraq, in Syria, and other places, that Israel is not as powerful as they thought, and this will actually increase their willingness to get into a war against Israel. I hope that the Americans are aware of this situation, and the Americans will not maintain pressure on Israel to stop the war on Gaza, definitely, especially because of the ramifications of such a step. Another thing which you didn't mention is the danger which is posed on Jordan. Jordan, although it has a very long border with Israel, Jordan is a weak country compared to the forces which threaten Israel and Jordan together from the north, from Iraq, from Syria, from Iran. And if the Iranian army decides to march to the west, means towards Israel, Jordan will not be any buffer zone between Israel and Jordan, between Israel and Iraq, and Jordan will collapse like in no time almost, vis-a-vis the armies or the forces which will run into Jordan coming from Iraq, especially if there are Iranians. Personally, I'm not sure that Iran will take part, an active part in this war, but it's enough that the 50 militias, which are pro-Iranian militias in Iraq, let alone Syria, the 17 militias which they have in Syria, will march on Jordan in order to invade Israel from the ground in some places between Eilat and the north, almost at the Kinneret. And there's a very, very long border with large part in the Negev, where there is no real barrier which can stop them. So apparently, or possibly, This is their plan. And Jordan should be very worried about this option.
As should Israel and the rest of the region. Dr. Kadal, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thank you so much, Lida.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple. And a potential deal for the release of the Israeli hostages appears to be stuck due to internal disagreement between Hamas leaders inside Gaza and those outside. The potential return of captives in exchange for Palestinian security prisoners and an extended pause in fighting awaits developments. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The Gaza terror chief Yahya Sinwar, believed operating his forces from a tunnel under Khan Yunis, is said to favor the acceptance of a temporary truce offer. Unnamed officials told the Wall Street Journal that Sinwar wants a 6-week halt to the war so Hamas operatives can regroup and more aid can enter Gaza. But Politburo head Ismail Haniyeh and officials based in Beirut are reportedly pushing for a permanent ceasefire, ending the war with international guarantees and a plan for rebuilding the enclave and the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners, including those serving life sentences. Israel has generally accepted the Qatari, U.S., and Egypt-mediated truce plan. However, the numbers of hostages and Palestinian security prisoners and other details of the proposal had not been finalized. The UN appears to be taking a backseat while encouraging an agreement.
I mean, this is part of the Secretary General's ongoing consultations with the Qatari leadership. The Prime Minister was here. They've, no surprise, discussed the efforts underway to end the fighting, to secure the release of the hostages, and to ensure support for humanitarian operations.
Was the Secretary General given any timeline for a potential start to a new cessation?
He was briefed on the latest.
And joining us now with more on the potential hostage deal is head of NGO Monitor, Dr. Gerald Steinberg. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello.
So it's been over 120 days now that the hostages are being held by Hamas, but it looks like a deal may be forthcoming. What do we know so far about this deal that's seemingly taking shape?
We need to be very, very careful about drawing conclusions. Not that it makes much difference what we speculate on, but I think that until an agreement is reached, everything is speculative. Everything is also a lot of pressure, a lot of attempts to create movement in terms of public opinion in different directions. So I think we need to be very careful. There are reports, and they may be credible, that after a series of meetings involving American, Israeli, Egyptian, and Qatari representatives from the security services, and then bringing the framework that was discussed to the heads of Hamas, that we may be making some movement towards an agreement. The rumors are that it's a partial agreement to release over, I think, a period of 45 days is one of the latest versions of a ceasefire, and one kidnapped victim. We use the term hostage, but I think we have to be very clear that these are people who have been traumatized, brutalized, and one released a day, which of course is absolutely ridiculous. And they should have been released. They should never have been kidnapped. But that's what the offer is being apparently being put on the table. At least that's what's reported. And the question is also, what does Hamas want in return? And there's a lot of speculation and talk about wanting some of the most brutal attackers that have killed Israelis over the last 20, 25 years. And that would be something that I think for most Israelis would be a price that they're not willing to pay, because it would just encourage more kidnappings and more events like this. So we have to look and see what the issues are as they develop. The heads of state, the Israeli decision makers, are in a very difficult position. Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Gantz, Mr. Gallant.
move away for a
Minister and everybody else.
Move away for a moment from the Israeli leadership and talk a little bit about Hamas's leadership, because a very interesting dynamic is being laid out with regards to infighting among the Hamas leadership, the leadership in Gaza and the leadership outside of Gaza. What can you tell us about this dynamic, this relationship?
Again, we're basing ourselves on rumors, and we don't know if these are deliberately being manufactured to create an image or whether they may have some truth behind them. The reports are that the two different sections of the Hamas leadership, the ones that are apparently still in Gaza, Mr. Sinwar in particular, and the ones that have now moved quite a long time ago and are living the life of luxury in Qatar. And there are differences, we are told, of opinion between them as to what the policy should be. And we don't know who's going to finally make the decisions. We are told that Yahya Sinwar was the person in charge who basically led the October 7th massacre, planned it, developed it, and he's the one who probably knows best where the hostages are being held, the kidnapped victims, and probably will have the greatest voice in determining their fate. The ones that are in Qatar can push. They may have more influence than simply verbal communications, but they are not on the ground in the tunnels in Gaza, and they cannot effect a release. They cannot force Yahya Sinwar to reach an agreement and actually implement that agreement. So there are lots of dynamics. We don't know the role of the Qatar leadership, what kind of role they play. Are they encouraging Hamas? Are they encouraging an agreement? Are they playing a game of a two-faced game of saying one thing in public and another thing in private? All these things we just don't know. We're told by the Americans that the Qatari leadership is being cooperative, but I would be very cautious about that kind of a judgment because they are the ones who have supported Hamas throughout the years and very much closely linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the umbrella organization that is basically led to the founding and operations of Hamas. So these are all questions which we can speculate on, but we really can't be sure.
Absolutely. All right. Dr. Gerald Steinberg, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And moving to the northern border, escalating fire on Sunday as Hezbollah fired missiles into Israel and Israel retaliating, striking southern Lebanon. The IDF bolstering its presence on the border as 3 IDF divisions are now deployed, ready for war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is amid a warning from Defense Minister Gallant that a potential pause in Gaza fighting will not apply to the north. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Defense Minister Gallant warned Hezbollah that a potential pause in Gaza fighting will not apply to the north. Gallant said the IDF will keep operating against the Lebanese terror group until security is restored for northern residents. The Army said that 3 IDF troop divisions have been deployed to the northern border in a strident warning to Hezbollah that Israel is ready for war. The IDF summed up efforts to reshape the security reality on the northern border to allow some 80,000 Israelis displaced by months of incessant attacks to return home. Since fighting on the northern border began soon after the October 7th attack on southern Israel, the IDF has targeted more than 3,400 Hezbollah sites and struck more than 150 cells, killing some 200 operatives, mostly members of Hezbollah. The IDF also confirmed strikes in Syria.
בתחילת המלחמה תקפנו מהיבשה ומהאוויר יותר מ-50 מטרות כאלה שהיו פרוסות בסוריה. אנחנו נמשיך לפעול. בכל מקום שחיזבאללה ינכח בו, אנחנו נפעל בכל מקום שנדרש במזרח התיכון.
Meanwhile, the Houthis were back in action over the weekend, firing a ballistic missile targeting Eilat. The Arrow air defense went into action, downing the missile over the Red Sea, outside Israeli airspace. The Houthis have fired several ballistic missiles and drones at Eilat in solidarity with the Gaza Strip, where Israel is battling Hamas. All of the projectiles have been intercepted or missed their target.
And the United States has hit dozens of Iranian-backed terror targets across Syria, Iraq, and Yemen over the weekend in retaliatory strikes over the deaths of 3 American soldiers in Jordan last week by Iranian-backed terror groups. ILTV's William Sharon has all the details.
The United States and the UK struck 36 Houthi military targets in Yemen Saturday in a new wave of attacks against the Iranian-backed terrorist group. The Houthis have continued to attack American and international ships and pose a threat to international shipping routes in the Red Sea. According to the Pentagon, the strikes hit buried weapons storage facilities, missile systems, launchers, and other capabilities in 13 locations across the country. The strikes in Yemen occurred in parallel to an unfolding U.S. military campaign in retaliation over the killing of 3 American soldiers in Jordan last week in a drone strike by Iranian-backed terrorists. Over the weekend, the U.S. carried out the first phase of the retaliatory response against Iran and its terror proxies, hitting at least 80 targets across Iraq and Syria. The U.S. has indicated that this is likely not the last of its retaliatory strikes. On Friday, U.S. President Joe Biden issued a statement saying that at his direction, U.S. military forces struck targets in Iraq and Syria that the IRGC and affiliated militias used to attack U.S. forces. The president reiterated that the U.S. does not seek conflict in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world, but to all those who seek to do us harm, we will respond.
And in other news, UNRA has been nominated for a Nobel Prize. Yes, you heard that correctly, and no, it's not satire. A Norwegian politician, Asmund Aukrust, has said that he nominated the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency for the Nobel Prize. This despite the organization coming under intense international scrutiny over its complicity in Hamas terrorism activities. At least 12 of UNRWA's employees are alleged to have been directly involved in the October 7th massacre against Israel, while another 1,200 of UNRWA's employees in Gaza are alleged to have direct links to the Iranian-backed terror groups Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Additionally, UN watchdog NGO UN Watch has revealed that over 3,000 UNRWA teachers openly celebrated and glorified the October 7th massacre in a Telegram group chat. As a result of the allegations, over a dozen countries suspended their funding for the international organization until a thorough investigation is conducted. Meanwhile, it's important to note that just because UNRWA has been nominated does not mean the Nobel Prize Committee will accept the nomination. Let's hope they'll have more sense than this Norwegian parliament member. And moving on, Pope Francis has issued a condemnation of all forms of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism, stating that they are a sin against God. The Pope also reaffirmed his solidarity with the Jewish people and called to release the hostages. Let's take a look.
In a letter to the Jewish population of Israel made public on Saturday, the Pope wrote that the Church rejects every form of anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism, unequivocally condemning manifestations of hatred toward Jews and Judaism as a sin against God. He penned the letter in the wake of a global wave of anti-Semitism and an increase in attacks against Jews worldwide. He said that he was moved by communication from friends and Jewish organizations around the world and wanted to assure his closeness and affection. He wrote, "Together with you, we Catholics are very concerned about the terrible increase in attacks against Jews around the world. We had hoped that never again would be a refrain heard by the new generations, yet now we see the path ahead requires ever closer collaboration to eradicate these phenomena." The Pope also noted that wars and divisions are increasing all over the world in what he called a piecemeal world war, and said his heart was torn at the sight of conflict in the Holy Land. He also called yet again for the release of the hostages held by Hamas. The Pope concluded that together, Jews and Catholics must commit to a path of friendship, solidarity, and cooperation in seeking ways to repair a destroyed world, working together in every part of the world, and especially in the Holy Land.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies and light rain leading us into the week, with temperatures tonight reaching lows of 9 degrees Celsius or 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, more cloudy skies and light rain around the country, with temperatures sitting at highs of 16 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Ladar Gavelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.